and welcome to Doing Business As, the small business law podcast from Tracktown Law. My name is Jared Hight, and I'm the founder of Tracktown Law and your host for today's episode. At Tracktown Law, I help business owners across Oregon and Idaho get their legal foundations right from the start. No jargon, no scare tactics, just the clarity you need to make smart decisions and keep your business moving forward. Today, we're talking about how to structure a multi-member LLC to avoid conflict, which is really just a polite way of saying how not to ruin your friendships or family relationships over money, power, or miscommunication. Before we get too deep, a quick disclaimer. I'm a licensed attorney in Oregon and Idaho, but listening to this podcast doesn't make me your lawyer, and nothing here should be treated as legal advice for your specific situation. Now, here's the thing about multi-member LLCs. They can be a great way to pool resources, skills, and energy, but they can also blow up spectacularly if you don't put the right structure in place from day one. And no, just calling each other partners and agreeing to split profits isn't enough. In fact, that's usually the start of the problem. Let me give you an example. A couple of friends in Boise start a mobile detailing business. One's great with marketing and customer service, the other's a wizard with logistics and operations. They file the LLC paperwork with the state, slap together a 2-page template from the internet, and call it good. They figure, hey, we're friends. What could go wrong? A year later, business is booming, but resentment is too. One of them is working 60-hour weeks, the other is checking in twice a week and still taking half the profits. They argue over how to reinvest money, who gets final say on purchases, whether to expand to another city. Eventually, they stop speaking and the business grinds to a halt. The state default rules kick in, and now they're splitting assets in a way that makes nobody happy. Here's what they didn't do. Define roles. Define decision-making authority. Clarify capital contributions. Set expectations for workload. Build in a way to resolve disputes without blowing everything up. That's what this episode is about. How to structure things in a way that prevents that story from being yours. First up, ownership percentages. In Oregon and Idaho, unless you say otherwise in your operating agreement, profits and voting rights are split equally among members. So if one person is putting in 90% of the capital or doing 90% of the work and you haven't spelled out a different structure, that's too bad. You're still each getting 50% and you each get an equal vote. That may be fine in some cases, but if it's not, you need to say so in writing. And it's not just about ownership, it's about control. Who gets to make decisions and which decisions require a vote? For example, do day-to-day operations fall to one managing member, or do all members weigh in on everything from hiring to vendor selection? Do you need unanimous consent to add a new member or sell major assets, or can a majority make that call? One of the best ways to avoid conflict in a multi-member LLC is to designate a managing member, or a managing structure, that gives someone the authority to act without needing consensus on every little issue. That doesn't mean they get to act like a dictator. It just means you avoid getting stuck in the mud because no one wants to sign off on buying printer ink or updating the website. Next, you need to deal with money. Who's putting in what, and what do they get in return? Are capital contributions purely financial, or are you counting sweat equity? If someone's contributing services instead of cash, how is that valued? Does everyone get paid for their work before profits are split, or is compensation baked into ownership percentages? These are not hypotheticals. These are the exact kinds of questions that cause multi-member LLCs to unravel. So if you're not clear on the difference between salary, guaranteed payments, and distributions, or if you haven't discussed how losses are handled during lean months, you're flying blind. Another major point of failure? Exit terms. In the last episode, we talked about buy-sell agreements. In a multi-member LLC, that's not optional. What happens if someone wants out? Can they sell their interest to anyone, or does the company or other members get first dibs? How do you decide what the interest is worth, and how does the business fund the buyout? Let me give you another example, this time from Eugene. A small landscape architecture firm is owned by 3 friends. One decides to move out of state and wants to cash out. The other 2 don't want a stranger as a third owner, but they can't afford to buy him out immediately. Their agreement is silent on payment terms. The departing member sues for immediate market value payout. The firm doesn't have the liquidity, and now the remaining partners are facing a forced sale or borrowing at terrible terms just to avoid dissolving. This could have been solved with a simple buyout clause, setting the valuation method and a payment plan with defined timelines. Instead, they're lawyering up and draining resources on a fight no one wanted. Dispute resolution is also a huge issue in multi-member LLCs. If you hit a deadlock, what's the plan? Mediation? Arbitration? Does someone have tie-breaking authority? Courts in both Oregon and Idaho have the power to dissolve an LLC if the members can't agree and the business can't function, but that's the nuclear option. You want to build in pressure release valves so things never reach that point. And then there's the stuff nobody wants to think about. Death, disability, divorce, bankruptcy. What happens if one member's ownership interest becomes part of a probate estate or gets dragged into a messy personal lawsuit? You need to have language that restricts involuntary transfers and provides clear steps for what happens when a member's life takes a sharp left turn. All of this goes into your operating agreement, and no, your 5-page template doesn't cover most of it. At best, it gives you generic placeholders. At worst, it locks you into state default rules that make no sense for your business. Now, if you're a husband and wife team, or a family-owned LLC, all of this matters even more. Emotions run higher. Roles and expectations are less clearly defined. The idea of treating your spouse or sibling like a business partner can feel awkward, but if you don't do it, you're asking for trouble. Put it in writing now and save yourself a fight later. Let me say this plainly. Good legal structure isn't about suspicion or untrusting. It's about protecting relationships. Most multi-member LLCs that fail don't fail because the business was bad. They fail because the relationships broke down and there was no roadmap for what to do next. If you're starting a business with one or more partners, or if you already have one and you're not sure your documents are solid, now is the time to review them, especially if any of this episode has made you shift uncomfortably in your chair. At Tracktown Law, I work with clients throughout Oregon and Idaho to build LLC structures that actually reflect how the business works and how people in it want to move forward. That means real conversations, clear terms, and documents that hold up when stress hits. If you'd rather read through today's content or send it to your business partner, there's a full blog post waiting for you at tracktownlaw.com. It covers everything we talked about and a bit more, tailored for small business owners across both states. Next time, we're shifting gears and talking about something deceptively simple, but absolutely essential: business bank accounts. Why you need one, what to avoid, and how sloppy banking habits can sabotage the very liability protection your LLC was supposed to give you. Thanks for listening.